This is the Third World War by Compass Games. We're playing the full campaign game, and we're probably going to extend it from the 8 turns to 12 turns as well. Depends how I get on with it. Now, I've had some people, I've had posts on the actual last video saying that they'd found that this game sort of bogs down into stalemates very, very quickly onto both the Balkans front, the Western front, and Norway. Now, the person who's posting it, as he said, they only play the individual sector scenarios, so they didn't play the full campaign game. And I'm sort of seeing, yeah, I can see where they're coming from. I really can. Because let's just go over and have a look at, you have to excuse me, I'm going to move around the table here. And let's have a look at this theatre, Scandinavia, which is quite a controversial theatre as such. Now, the Russians here, they can attack across this like causeway bridge stuff into they've taken a significant portion of Norway, but they're now in this choke point here. Only amphibious type units can attack, and they attack at half strength. So the Allies got pretty good units. They're not very strong, but they're blocking that position. They've tried some power drops into here, but yeah, again, they're blocked there, and they haven't got much strength with these power drops. And the fact they're going to get isolated next turn as a result, because as you see, the only line of communication goes into Finland. Now, I've been told that if you commit the Soviet Strategic Command with all its sort of paratroopers and extras to this particular theatre and naval unit and naval landing forces, you can actually get around this sort of conundrum where you're locked down here. Now, the Warsaw Pact also did a landing here, a naval landing. Now, they're not going to get isolated as far as I'm concerned, unless they, I don't know what happens if they lose control of the Norwegian Sea, whether they could get isolated there. But they're not going anywhere because they're sort of pinned in. Now, other Norwegian units are on the way north, and they've also got their American POMCUS or whatever it is, the air landing unit arrived. And I can see where they're saying if you just play Scandinavia, this we're coming round again, this could easily sort of lock up and become totally unplayable unless you attack Sweden. No, you'd have to attack Finland. Even that wouldn't do any good, because you'd get stuck in these passes here. You'd have to attack Finland and Sweden, which is it's just a no-no for the forces in the north. They're just not strong enough to take on those two neutral nations and Norway plus its NATO allies. But what has happened down here, if we move into the Baltic, that Denmark was conquered and they were knocked out. Their morale just disintegrated. They went from shaken to disrupted, and then they lost control of all of their cities. So effectively they're out of the game. Now that gives the Warsaw Pact the opportunity to attack from the south into Norway. Now I don't know about the Scandinavian front scenario. I assume that's something that couldn't happen in that limited scenario. So you suddenly opened up because I'm playing the campaign game. Right, we look at Western Front is another one where you sort of, it does seem to be bogging down into a slugfest all along the front. Now, the Warsaw Pact, they've made progress. They pushed through a bit. Maybe they use chemical and nuclear, they could break through as well. But I seem to think if you were playing a more skillful player, I do believe the Warsaw Pact could win on this front. Because I'm playing myself, uh, yeah, I sort of have a bit of a knowledge of what I'm potentially going to do from either side. Although it's such a big game, you sort of get round that a little bit. But NATO have got a fairly solid set of units along that front, and they've backed it up with what I call it's a pack defence. That's what I call it. It's based on something that I originally came across in Decline and Fall of the Third Reich, I think it was called. Or was it Rise and Fall of the Third Reich? Where you could, in Russia, so long as you kept enough units in your back area, no one's ever going to be able to break through. So you keep your weaker units as a back force to your main thing. So any sort of area they punch through, they're not going to get very far. Anyway, so the Soviets haven't really been able to make much impact there. We have another thing coming in that Austria are going to go to NATO on turn 3. And that does leave the Warsaw Pact forces that are kept in positions round Austria, as they're going to be able to wipe Austria out very, very quickly. Because the Austrian forces, they've got pretty poor proficiency and they're very poor in strength. But I don't think that's going to help them very much because of the way all the mountains and the mountain passes run. Even if Austria goes, Italy are perfectly capable of sealing the routes to the west. The routes don't really go anywhere. They go to the Swiss border. So I don't think Austria joining NATO is going to help at all, and it's not going to give the Warsaw Pact this massive front where they can break through in Germany. What they can do is put some pressure on Italy, but the NATO forces within the Italian sort of northern area are pretty strong, and that terrain is difficult to break through. Admittedly, the Italians have moved some units north into Germany, which is probably not a good idea. They might end up having to call them back. Now, there's another thing here which I'm having to role play, is that Yugoslavia will go NATO if Austria is invaded. Now, I could just sit here and say, well, I'm not going to invade Austria, what's the point? I'm going to have to think about this. I think, what would the Warsaw Pact do in this scenario? I don't know. So there's an option, they can just hang on there, and that will keep Yugoslavia out of the war, which stops the war from spreading all the way down the Balkans here. So that's an option. Now, the other front that tends to become a stalemate is this one, the Balkans front, because there's a lot of units packed in there. It's a very narrow front. It's even more narrow because Greece is neutral in this particular version of the campaign game. So I can't see either side smashing their way through there. Well, I certainly can't see the Warsaw Pact smashing their way through and getting the Turkish Straits open. But then again, I can't see Turkey being able to do any more than maintain a defensive line. Now, the Pact have got the option of attacking Greece, but yet again, that doesn't really give them much leeway. You know, you've only got a tiny front that you could activate, another couple of hexes, basically. You'd stretch the Turks out, a couple more hexes as well, but I can't see that being a decent strategy. If we go over here, the only thing that might unlock the Balkans is what's going on in Anatolia, that the Turks have pretty much been driven back, but they've had some new reinforcements coming in, so they might be able to stabilise this area. And they have got some units just off board which are regrouping. So I don't know. I think the Pact may have reached the maximum penetration there that they're going to get into Anatolia. But it could open up the Balkans from the rear, by units can move off map and then they could come on to the map there through Turkey. Anyway, I don't think they're strong enough to do that. If we look at Syria, Syria are taking a bit of a battering. They are almost certainly to be the next nation that jacks it in. Very close to being shaken, and they've got very few units anyway. If we look at the front, yeah, there's a front forming all along the boundaries between the Americans, well, between the Allies and NATO and the Warsaw Pact. Iraq's in a bit of a mess as well. A lot of their units got caught deep inside Iran and pretty much badly cut up by the Soviets. The Americans have got some decent, strong forces there, but they're not enough to do any more than hold this. But I think there are enough units there possibly to hold on to little bits of Iran. But to be quite honest, the war in Iran is pretty much lost. So as I said, Iraq's in a shaky state, and I don't think if there's any concerted pressure on what's left of the Iraqi forces, they're gonna buckle and their morale's gonna collapse. You've got Saudi units coming in. The Saudi units, yet again, they're not particularly brilliant, and they haven't got a very good morale, and their nation is subject to surrender as well. So oddly, talking to the poster, it said that this was the area which is most flexible and most interesting, but they said they found the whole idea of the war in this like sub-theatre to be less than interesting. Well, not less than interesting, less interesting. They weren't really committed to this sector, and they didn't really enjoy when they played that particular Middle East type war scenario. So all in all, I don't know, the Warsaw Pact, I don't think they're going to win this, because I just can't see them breaking through on the central front. I can see them wreaking a bit of havoc in Norway by attacking through the south, but the problem is they've got a lot of units, but they can't be strong everywhere. And yeah, thinking about this Yugoslavia Austria thing, I think the Pact would probably be better just to ignore the Austrian front. Say they did, and NATO decided to start operating through Austria. Yeah, they could turn your flank quite badly here. As I say, I don't know what to do with this. I've got to role play it and I've got to think it through. But that's it. Well, I'm still having fun, I've got to admit, and I think playing the campaign game, it gives you a lot more options to unlock some of these bottlenecks that have appeared. I think probably my biggest criticism of this game is the fact that you can have unlimited recoveries effectively. All right, you've got to maintain a line because you can't recover while you're in the front line. But the fact that any unit can recover one step of disruption per phase or segment, no, it's actually an impulse per impulse on your side, means that you're constantly building your units back up. The only disadvantage is the pack can't build up. When they lose one step, they can't build back to full strength. But that's the only limitation on recovery. I think potentially that's a problem with the design. Anyway, I've waffled on enough, and it's all to play for. I doubt many people will actually watch this video all the way through.